This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Just take a second and transport yourself back in time. Imagine you are a peasant living in Europe during the Middle Ages.
Not exactly five-star vacation, I'm guessing.
Definitely not. Life is, to borrow that famous phrase from Thomas Hobbes, nasty, brutish, and short. You're probably cold, you are almost certainly hungry, and your body is just aching from working in the fields from sunrise to sunset.
The concept of a weekend doesn't even exist. Retirement, forget about it.
Not at all. But when you finally curl up on your straw mat at night, shivering a little, you don't dream of a slightly better harvest or, a marginally warmer hut. You dream of something much, much bigger. You dream of cocaine.
Cocaine, the land of plenty. It's such a fascinating psychological phenomenon. It shows up in folklore all across medieval Europe, sometimes under different names, but the vision is always the same.
It's the ultimate fantasy.
It was the collective fever dream of a starving, overworked population.
And the descriptions in the source material we're digging into today are just incredible. I mean, they're wildly specific. To even get into the land of cocaine, you have to eat your way through a wall of rice pudding that's 3 miles thick.
That's the barrier to entry, rice pudding.
That's your entrance exam. And once you tunnel through that pudding, you find yourself in a world that is a complete inversion of medieval reality. There are rivers, actual rivers flowing with wine.
Wow.
The weather is a permanent, balmy spring. You never get too hot or too cold. And the food. This is where the starvation hallucinations really kick in. Roast geese fly overhead, but they don't just fly. They crash land directly onto your plate, pre-carved and steaming hot.
And I think I remember reading there are pancakes growing on the trees.
Exactly, like leaves. And the social rules are flipped on their head, too. In the real world, the peasant is at the very bottom. In cocaine, everyone is equal. There's no fighting, no arguing.
And the most important law of the land.
The less you work, the more you earn. Sleeping late is a virtue. Laziness is the actual path to wealth.
It sounds completely ridiculous to us, right? Like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
But here is where it gets really interesting. And this is the starting point for the book we're diving into today.
Yes.
If you were to take that medieval peasant, grab him by his tunic, drag him through a time machine, and drop him into a modern supermarket, or even just a suburban home with climate control, a fridge full of food, and Wi-Fi, what would he think?
He would think he had died and gone to cocaine, no question.
He absolutely would. Statistically speaking, we're living in the dream.
It's a pretty jarring realization, isn't it? We spend so much time looking at what's wrong with the world, but if you just zoom out, the data is staggering. In 1820, something like 94% of the entire world's population lived in extreme poverty.
94%.
Today, it is under 10%. In the last century alone, we have doubled global life expectancy. We have eradicated smallpox. We've reduced child mortality to a tiny fraction of what it was.
Even someone living below the poverty line in a Western country today often has access to antibiotics, electricity, refrigeration, a caloric intake that a medieval king would have been deeply envious of.
We have achieved the land of plenty. The medieval utopia is our Monday morning reality.
But, and this is the central paradox that drives this entire deep dive, if we are living in the medieval dream, why is everyone so grumpy?
That is the question.
It really is.
Right. I mean, look around. Burnout is basically an epidemic. Depression is the leading cause of illness worldwide among teenagers. We have people working harder than ever, stressed out of their minds, popping antidepressants, and just feeling this deep sense of pessimism.
We have the wealth. We have the wine rivers, or at least, reasonably priced Cabernet at the grocery store. But we seem to have lost the plot.
And that brings us to the book we're discussing today, Utopia for Realists, and How We Can Get There, by Rutger Bregman. And you might remember Bregman from our previous deep dive on his other book, Humankind.
Yes. The Dutch historian who makes the case that humans are actually decent deep down, not just secret sociopaths waiting to emerge.
That's the one. Bregman is a fascinating figure. He's a historian and a journalist for The Correspondent, which is this really interesting ad-free member-funded platform in the Netherlands. He represents this new wave of thinkers who are trying to step back from the daily news cycle and look at these huge, centuries-long arcs of history.
And what I love about his approach in this book is that he positions himself as a sort of historian archaeologist. He isn't claiming he invented these ideas we're going to talk about today.
Right.
He's digging through the dead ends of history ideas that were almost implemented or were tried and then forgotten to find a blueprint for where we could go from here.
His core thesis is that the reason we're so miserable in our land of plenty is that we've run out of dreams. The old utopia came true, but we never replaced it with a new one.
We're stuck in what he calls a technocracy.
A technocracy, meaning we just focus on the technical details, like managers.
Exactly. We treat politics and society as a problem of management. We tweak the tax rate by 1% here, we adjust a regulation there, we're managing the status quo. But as Oscar Wilde said, and Bregman quotes this right at the beginning, progress is the realization of utopias.
And if you don't have a map that includes a utopia, a better place to sail toward, you just drift.
You stagnate.
Yeah.
Bregman's argument is that we need to stop being managers and start being utopians again. We need to imagine a world that is radically better than this one.
But we're not talking about, sci-fi utopias here. We're not talking about colonies on Mars or everyone living in virtual reality.
No, not at all. We are talking about social and economic utopias.
Yeah.
Concrete policies that could be implemented.
So the mission for this deep dive is to explore Bregman's 3 big pillars for a new utopia. And I have to warn you, listener, these sound radical at first. When I first read the outline, I thought, okay, this is going to be a fantasy novel.
I had the same reaction.
We're talking about a 15-hour work week, universal basic income, and open borders.
They do sound radical. But what we're going to see as we unpack the source material is that these aren't just pipe dreams. They are backed by hard data, historical precedents, and some of the most prominent economic thinkers of the last century.
So let's jump into the first pillar, the 15-hour work week, or as I like to call it, the prophecy that failed. Because apparently we were all supposed to be there by now.
We were. And this comes from none other than John Maynard Keynes. Now, for those who might not know, Keynes is arguably the most important economist of the 20th century.
A giant in the field.
Absolutely. In 1930, right as the Great Depression is starting to bite and everyone is panicking, he gives this lecture in Madrid called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren.
Which is us. We are the grandchildren.
We are the grandchildren. And he makes this incredibly bold prediction. He looks at the rate of technological advancement and capital accumulation, basically how fast machines were getting better. And he predicts that by the year 2030, the standard of living in the West would be 4 to 8 times higher than it was in 1930.
And was he right about that part?
He was spot on. In terms of wealth and production, we hit that target easily. We are vastly, vastly richer than the people of the 1930s.
Okay.
But he also predicted that because we would be so efficient and so rich, we wouldn't need to work as much. He thought that by 2030, a 15-hour work week would be the norm.
15 hours.
He genuinely thought our biggest problem would be boredom, how to fill all that leisure time.
I think I speak for everyone listening when I say, Keynes, buddy, where is my 3-day weekend? Because if anything, it feels like we're working more than ever. We carry our offices in our pockets now.
We do.
So why was he so wrong about the time when he was so right about the money?
Well, Bregman identifies a few dead ends or wrong turns we took. The first one is pretty simple. Consumerism.
Right. We chose stuff over time.
We made a collective choice, although it wasn't really a conscious vote, to trade time for stuff. We could have worked less and maintained, say, a 1950s standard of living, but we wanted the bigger house, the second car, the new iPhone every year.
It's the hedonic treadmill. You run faster and faster just to stay in the same place relative to everyone else.
Precisely. But there's another factor that's a bit more nuanced, and it involves the feminist revolution.
This is a really interesting point in the book, and it's a bit ironic.
It is. So women entered the workforce in massive numbers in the late 20th century, which was a huge, undeniable triumph for equality and freedom. But the sociological expectation was that this would liberate families. If you have 2 people earning.
Maybe both could work part-time, split the burden.
That was the idea. Instead, the norm became 2 full-time incomes. And the market responded. The cost of living, especially for things like housing and good school districts, rose to meet that dual income capacity.
So instead of buying leisure, it led to families working double the hours just to maintain the same level of security.
Exactly. It's what Elizabeth Warren called the 2-income trap, a really critical and often overlooked part of the story.
And then there's the nature of the work itself. We have to talk about the bullshit job phenomenon.
Yes, a term coined by the anthropologist David Graeber, which Bregman discusses at length.
Oh.
The prediction was that technology would automate the drudgery, the farming, the manufacturing, and it did. Those jobs shrank massively as a percentage of the workforce.
But we didn't just go home.
No, we created this massive service sector. And within that sector, there's a whole layer of management, administration, consulting, public relations, telemarketing that, well, arguably doesn't produce tangible value.
I love the example Bregman uses to illustrate this value gap. He contrasts two strikes. It's almost like a perfect laboratory experiment for society.
It really is. First, you have the New York City sanitation workers strike in 1968. They walked off the job for just a few days.
Yeah, it was chaos.
Absolute disaster. Trash piled up on the streets, rats everywhere, the risk of disease skyrocketed. The city declared a state of emergency within a week. It proved instantly that garbage collectors are essential to the very survival of the city. Their value is tangible and immediate.
Okay, now compare that to the Irish bank strike of 1970.
This is such a great story. In 1970, all bankers in Ireland went on strike. The banks closed their doors, and they stayed closed for 6 months.
6 months. If the garbage men stopped for 6 months, civilization would literally end. What happened when the bankers stopped?
Not much. I mean, not nothing, but society didn't collapse. The economy kept functioning. People kept buying and selling. And the way they did it was incredibly human. They used the pubs.
The pubs became the banks.
Basically. The publicans, the bar owners, they knew everyone in the village. They knew who was good for the money. So people started writing checks and IOUs on scraps of paper, sometimes on the back of beer coasters, and the pubs would accept them.
That's incredible.
Local community trust completely replaced the centralized banking system. 11 billion pounds worth of currency was traded in these informal IOUs.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. When the banks finally reopened and all those beer coaster checks cleared, the discrepancy, the amount of fraud, was tiny. It highlighted this massive disconnect in our system.
That the jobs that create the most tangible social value, teachers, care workers, sanitation workers, often pay the least and have the lowest status.
While the jobs that involve shifting money around or managing the people who shift the money, bankers, corporate lawyers, consultants, pay the most, but, as this strike showed, might be less essential than we think.
And this obsession with work for work's sake has real health consequences. We're in this race against the machine, trying to out-efficient the robots, and it's just killing us.
It is. In the past, leisure was a sign of wealth. If you were a rich Victorian, you did not work.
Yeah.
You showed off how much free time you had.
Right.
Today, extreme busyness is a status symbol. If you ask someone how they are and they say, "Oh, I'm so busy, I'm swamped," that's a humble brag. It implies you're important.
But Bregman argues this is just a trap. We are wealthy enough as a society to work less. We just need the political imagination to redistribute that time.
Which leads us perfectly into the second pillar. Because if we're going to work less, how do we survive? How do we pay for things? Enter universal basic income.
UBI, the idea of free money for everyone.
That's how it's often framed, yes.
So just to clarify for the listener, because there are a lot of misconceptions here, we are not talking about welfare as we know it today.
Correct. That's a crucial distinction. Traditional welfare is targeted. You have to be poor enough or sick enough or prove you're looking for work hard enough to get it. It comes with a mountain of bureaucracy, surveillance, and often shame.
Okay, so how is UBI different?
UBI is, it's universal. It's a monthly allowance paid to every single citizen, regardless of whether they are rich or poor, working or unemployed. It's a floor, a foundation beneath which no one can fall.
And what surprised me in the source material is who has supported this idea in the past. You'd think this is some far-left socialist fantasy, but Bregman lists some heavy hitters from the other side of the aisle.
Oh, absolutely. This is one of the few ideas that really bridges the political divide. Milton Friedman, the godfather of neoliberal free market economics, was a major proponent.
Milton Friedman.
He called it a negative income tax. But the principle is the same. Friedrich Hayek, another icon of the right, supported a version of it. And Richard Nixon almost made it law in the United States.
Why? What was the appeal for them?
They saw it as the capitalist road to communism. It cuts government bureaucracy. No more inspectors checking if you're deserving enough. You just give people cash and let them decide how to participate in the market. It's simple, it's efficient, and it empowers the individual.
But the immediate objection, and I can hear the listener thinking it right now, is if you give people free money, they'll stop working. They'll just sit on the couch and drink beer.
That is the big intuition. It's the first question everyone asks. But Bregman is obsessed with data, not intuition. And we actually have data on this. We have the Mincome experiment.
The town with no poverty.
Dauphin, Manitoba. In the 1970s, the Canadian and provincial governments ran this massive experiment. They guaranteed a basic income to the entire town. For 4 years, the checks just kept coming, no strings attached.
Perfect test case. So
Yeah.
did everyone quit their jobs?
No. That's the headline finding. The workforce participation barely budged. There were only 2 groups who worked significantly less.
Okay, who were they?
One was new mothers, who used the money to stay home longer with their newborns and take longer maternity leaves.
Which most people today would argue is a good thing for society.
A net positive, absolutely. And the other group was teenage boys,
Teenage boys. Why them?
because they stopped dropping out of school to help support their families. High school graduation rates surged. They were working less in the formal economy because they were studying more. They were investing in their future.
That sounds like a resounding success.
It was, and the benefits went way beyond labor. Hospitalization rates dropped by 8.5%.
Wow.
Fewer accidents, better mental health, domestic violence decreased. It turns out poverty is really, really expensive. It causes accidents, stress, illness. When you remove that constant, grinding poverty, you save a fortune on healthcare and police.
So what happened? Why isn't Dauphin the model for the entire world today?
Politics. A conservative government swept into power in the middle of the experiment. They didn't like the idea ideologically. They cut the funding, boxed up all the research files, thousands of them, and literally hid them in a warehouse.
You're kidding.
For decades. It wasn't until a researcher named Evelyn dug them up in the 2000s and painstakingly analyzed the data. It's a classic, tragic case of ideology trumping evidence.
It really is. And the Nixon story is even more frustrating. You mentioned he almost passed it.
So close. It was 1969, Nixon's Family Assistance Plan. It passed the House of Representatives with huge support, but it died in the Senate.
Why? What killed it?
A smear campaign based on bad history.
This is a Speenham land story.
Right. There was an advisor in the White House named Martin Anderson, who was a big Ayn Rand fan. He hated the idea of the poor getting free money. So he showed Nixon a briefing paper about the Speenham land system, which was an Old English welfare system from 1795.
And what did the paper say?
The briefing claimed that Speenham land made the poor lazy and immoral, and that it completely destroyed the local economy.
And Nixon believed it.
He did. He quoted in speeches, "We can't repeat the mistakes of Speenham land. The problem. The history was completely wrong.
It was a myth.
A total myth. Later historians proved that Speenham land was actually a success. It prevented mass starvation during a time of high food prices and didn't increase population growth or laziness. The lazy poor narrative was essentially fake news from the 18th century, propagated by Malthus and others who just hated the idea of helping the poor.
But that myth was enough to kill UBI in America for 50 years.
It was. It shows how one bad historical analogy can change the world.
But let's bring it to the present. Bregman gives us a modern example that actually works, and it's from Utah, of all places.
Yes, the Housing First Initiative. Utah, a very conservative state, looked at the problem of chronic homelessness. They did the math. They realized that between jail time, emergency room visits, and policing, a chronically homeless person was costing the state about $16,670 a year.
And the cost to just give them an apartment.
About $11,000 a year, and that even included a social worker.
So it's literally cheaper to just give them a home.
Exactly. This is utopia for realists in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's not just bleeding heart morality, it's coal hard efficiency. Lloyd Pendleton, the guy in charge, was a conservative cowboy type. He initially told homeless people to get a job, but when he saw the data, he changed his mind completely.
And they give people homes, no strings attached.
No rehab requirement, no job requirement,
Yeah.
and chronic homelessness in Utah dropped by 74%.
It just flips the logic. We usually think you have to fix yourself to deserve a home. The data says you need a home to even begin to fix yourself.
And you need money to participate in society. This connects to a really crucial concept in the book, the psychology of scarcity.
Right.
Studies show that scarcity, the constant lack of money, actually lowers your IQ. It consumes your mental bandwidth. If you're constantly worrying about how to pay for your next meal or keep the lights on, you can't plan for the future, you can't look for a better job, you can't help your kids with their homework.
UBI frees up that bandwidth.
It literally makes people smarter. It gives them the cognitive space to make better decisions.
Okay, so we have a 15-hour work week to give us time and UBI to give us security. Now we come to the third pillar. And this one.
This one is the political hot potato, open borders.
This is undoubtedly the most controversial one in the current climate. But Bregman argues it is the single most effective economic superweapon we have available.
He uses a thought experiment to start this off, the story of John.
Right, he asks you to imagine a guy named John. He's starving, he's a hard worker, he's smart, but he lives in a place where there is no work and no food.
Okay.
He knows that a few hundred miles away, there's a guy who is willing to hire him for a wage that would save his life and his family's lives. John packs his bag and starts walking. But then, men with guns stop him. They tell him he can't cross this imaginary line in the dirt. So he goes home and starves. Bregman asks, is the government that hired those guards liable?
It's a powerful way to reframe it. We just accept borders as natural, but they are relatively new, aren't they? Historically speaking, yes. Passports and strict border controls are largely a post-World War I invention. For most of human history, migration was the norm, and the arbitrariness of it is just staggering. Where you were born determines about 60% of your lifetime income.
60%.
It's not your talent, your hard work, or your grit. It's whether you were born in New York or in Mogadishu. Bregman calls this birthplace discrimination, and he compares it to feudalism. It is the single biggest driver of global inequality.
But the economic argument, what happens if we just open the gates? Doesn't the system collapse?
That's the intuition. They will steal our jobs or wages will plummet.
Yeah.
But the economic consensus is surprisingly unified on the other side. Bregman cites multiple studies showing that opening borders would increase the gross worldwide product, the wealth of the entire planet, by anywhere from 67% to 172%.
Wait, 100% growth? You mean doubling the world's wealth? How is that even possible?
It's simple arbitrage. You are taking labor from where it is unproductive and moving it to where it is productive. A brilliant farmer in a developing nation might produce $500 worth of value a year because of poor soil and infrastructure. Move that same person to a developed nation with better technology, legal protections, and safety, and they might produce $20,000 worth of value doing the same amount of work.
So you're just unlocking massive amounts of human potential that is currently trapped behind these arbitrary lines.
It's like leaving trillion-dollar bills on the sidewalk and refusing to pick them up.
What about the brain drain, though? The fear that if all the doctors and engineers leave the developing world, it just hurts the countries they leave behind.
That's a common fear, but the data suggests it's actually a brain gain in the long run. First, there are remittances. Migrants send huge amounts of money back home. It vastly outweighs all foreign aid from governments combined.
And that money builds schools and businesses back home.
Exactly. And second, ideas travel. Migrants who experience democracy, different norms about education or women's rights, often influence their home countries from afar or when they eventually return. It is not a zero-sum game.
It really seems like all three of these pillarsless work, basic income, open borders require us to fundamentally change how we measure success. Right now, as a society, we are obsessed with one number, GDP, gross domestic product.
The holy grail of politics. If GDP goes up, the country is winning. If it goes down, we panic. But Bregman, and many economists before him, argue that GDP is a deeply broken metric for a land of plenty.
He talks about the broken window fallacy.
Yes, it's a great illustration. If I walk down the street and smash a shop window, GDP goes up. Because the shopkeeper has to pay a glazier to fix it. The glazier buys glass. Money changes hands. Production happens. But if I just keep the window clean, nothing happens. GDP stays flat. GDP measures activity, not value or well-being.
So things like pollution, crime, divorce, these are all actually great for GDP.
They're fantastic for GDP. Pollution requires cleanup crews. That's GDP. Crime requires prisons, lawyers, police. That's GDP. Divorce requires 2 houses instead of 1, and a lot of lawyers. It's a GDP goldmine.
But are any of those things progress?
Of course not. There are negative externalities that we count as positives.
Bregman has this great line. Productivity is for robots. Humans excel at wasting time, playing, and creating.
It's a call to shift our dashboard. Instead of just measuring how much stuff we produce, we should be measuring happiness, health, community connection, sustainability. If you only optimize for GDP, you'll end up with a very busy, very rich, and very miserable world.
Which is basically where we are now.
Pretty much.
So we have the diagnosis, we have the blueprint, the 15-hour week, UBI, open borders, but how do we actually get there? Because right now this feels politically impossible. If I go to a politician and say, hey, open borders and free money, they'll laugh me out of the room.
And this is the final and maybe most crucial section of the deep dive, how change actually happens. Bregman uses the concept of the Overton window. which is the range of ideas that are considered acceptable in public discourse at any given time.
And right now, UBI is way outside the window.
It's radical. It's unrealistic. But windows can shift.
He starts the section with a really weird story about a UFO cult.
It's a classic study by the psychologist Leon Festinger, the Chicago UFO cult of 1954. They believed the world was going to end in a great flood on December 21st. They quit their jobs, sold their stuff, and waited for the aliens to land a spaceship and rescue them.
Okay, so December 21st comes and goes. No apocalypse.
No apocalypse. The world is fine. Now, you would think they would admit they were wrong, but they didn't.
What did they do?
They believed more strongly. They decided that their faith and their prayers had been so powerful that God had called off the flood and saved the world.
Wow.
This is a famous demonstration of cognitive dissonance. When facts clash with our deep beliefs, we don't change our beliefs. We just twist the facts to fit them.
So if facts don't change minds, what does?
And this is the big lesson Bregman draws from the Mont Pelerin Society.
Sounds like a secret Illuminati group.
In a way, they kind of were. In 1947, a group of neoliberal thinkers, Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, met in this little Swiss village. At the time, they were the fringe, the absolute fringe. The world was Keynesian. Everyone believed in big government, high taxes, strong unions.
Friedman and Hayek were considered crazy radicals.
Completely. But what did they do? They played the long game. They didn't try to win the next election. They focused on shifting that Overton window. They built castles in the sky. They wrote books. They taught students. They created think tanks. They developed their theories.
They kept their ideas ready.
Exactly. Friedman had this strategy. You keep your ideas ready. Because eventually, a crisis will hit. And when a crisis hits, like the stagflation of the 1970s, the politicians will look around in a panic for a new idea. And the neoliberals walked up and said, here is the blueprint. We've had it ready for 30 years.
And it worked. By the 1980s, Reagan and Thatcher were implementing exactly what those crazy guys in the Swiss village were talking about decades earlier.
That's the lesson. The unreasonable ideas of today become the inevitable policies of tomorrow. Bregman's argument is that the left, or really anyone who wants a better future, needs to learn from the neoliberals. Stop trying to just manage the current system.
Start building the intellectual infrastructure for the next one.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to be called unrealistic. Every major milestone of civilization democracy, the end of slavery, votes for women, was once considered a dangerous utopian fantasy.
The difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. That's the Keynes quote he uses to end the book.
It's the perfect summary. We are trapped in old ideas about work, about merit, about borders, about what progress even means. Escaping them is the hardest part.
So let's wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground. We're rich, but we're stuck. We've reached the land of plenty, but we've somehow lost our sense of purpose.
And the way out, according to Bregman, is to embrace utopian thinking again. Basic income gives us the security to say no to bad jobs and to take risks. The 15-hour work week gives us the time to be human, to care for each other, to play, to create art. And open borders gives us justice on a global scale.
It's a compelling vision, and I want to leave the listener with the provocative thought that Bregman poses near the end of the book. It's a very personal question. If your income was guaranteed, if you knew for a fact that you wouldn't starve no matter what would you do?
Would you keep your current job?
Would you paint? Would you start a business? Would you go back to school? Would you spend more time with your kids or care for your aging parents?
It's a scary question in a way, because it forces us to confront how much of our lives are dictated by fear of survival rather than by genuine choice. But if we can build a society where survival is a given, imagine the explosion of creativity and human flourishing that would follow. That is the utopia for realists.
And that is where we'll leave it. If you want to dive deeper, the book is Utopia for Realists by Rutger Bregman, and it's out now wherever you get your books. It's a fantastic read full of data and stories we couldn't even touch on here. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Always a pleasure. Keep dreaming.
See you next time.
Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.